Hey everybody, welcome back. In today's video, we're going to have a look at Avalanche. Now, I'm sure you're all aware, Avalanche has been going crazy these last few months, and that's probably because of the GameFi narrative that's been pushed. We spoke about this a while ago, sort of when it started popping off, but a little before. And of course, Avalanche has been going crazy, going from lows of $8 all the way up to $84, basically a 6x or a 450% move. So brilliant price action from Avalanche. And again, just to reiterate, I was one of those people that thought coming to this crunch, this sort of head and shoulders pattern thing, we would see a downward move. But instead we've had an upward move. And this is great. I mean, crypto has gained so much value. I remember when we were teetering on the whole crypto space, just about staying above $1 trillion. And now we're closer to 2 trillion than we are to 1 trillion, which is great news. But I want to have a look in this video at a few possible scenarios. I want to see where Avalanche might be headed in the near future. I'm sure there's a couple of lines here that are sticking out to you already that might indicate to you where I'm going to go with this video. Probably the main one on the US dollar pair is this white guy, this white line, this resistance line. And we'll get into that right now, actually, to be honest with you, because we can see here back in 2021, early 2021, so close to 3 years, basically 3 years ago now, Avalanche had a similar rally. It went up in great proportions, had about 3 weeks of solid price action on the way up, had a couple of weeks of accumulation, steadying, and then another rally up, but a shorter rally up, and then sort of another resistance, whatever. In the last few months, we've seen a very similar thing, where we've seen Avalanche sort of come from these lows. Again, this was basically the lowest point Avalanche had been, excluding this sort of big sell-off. I'm not quite sure what this was, but it seemed to be a one-time thing. Avalanche put in its low, more or less, of about $2, excluding this sort of sub-dollar price. Avalanche put in its low of $2, and then once its low was in, it instantly sort of exploded upwards and sort of went to a level it was at not too long ago. So we can see here this level here of about $10 that it sort of launched at. Avalanche drops below, puts in its low, and its all-time low here technically, and then rallies back up. And we see a similar move here where Avalanche trading at $20 dips down to $8 and then instantly climbs back up to this level. And then what do we see after that? We see a bit of accumulation and then another pump up to this sort of white line, this sort of $40 mark. And again, we see that here playing out the exact same, more or less, so far. Now, we're in the early stages of this, so there's a very good chance it doesn't play out. Again, I thought we were going to move to the downside here. No one can ever know for sure what's going to happen with crypto. It's just impossible. But what we do know is what's happened before, and before we saw Avalanche get rejected here, basically. It spent a while up at this range, and then eventually had a big sell-off or it was forgotten about or whatever. And this was during the Bullrun year. This was during 2021, when basically all altcoins and crypto exploded here. Avalanche retraced a lot of its valued gain by the first half of the year. Going into the second, third quarter of 2021, Avalanche was trading at $10. This was in the middle of all the bull run craziness where altcoins were exploding. And then, of course, Avalanche did go crazy in July, late July, August. Avalanche really took off and put in highs of $150. But I'm just pointing out that in the short term, we could see something like this play out where we sort of come to this line. Maybe we trade above it for a little while and dip below. Maybe we instantly, shoot upwards and this sort of $40 range is forgotten about and maybe even becomes a support. Who knows? I just want to point out a few things here that have happened before and could happen again. Another interesting sort of piece of information that I would like to look at is this sort of Bitcoin halving scenario here that Avalanche has never experienced before. Avalanche launched just after the halving, and it's only a few months now away from the halving. We're about 4 months now. It's due end of April sort of time, and Avalanche launched in mid-July. So we're coming up to 4 years of information, which is useful. But using the data that we have, we can see Avalanche traded more or less downwards for a few months after the halving. Again, we had this initial launch price, which is kind of, you can't really draw too much from a launch price week, but we see it settled at somewhere around $10 and traded down. If we sort of bring this over and say, okay, well, we're trading at $40 now, Avalanche kind of moved down quite a bit, sort of lost 50% of its value after these pumps. After the halving, we can say maybe we might see Avalanche move down somewhere like $20, which again puts us in line with this sort of support that we drew before, we could see Avalanche come back down. But again, in the short term, Avalanche could climb higher. It could come up to $60 and maybe come down to $30. I really can't tell you. This is sort of a very explosive time right now, especially leading up to the halving, because there's a lot of people doing a lot of things, anticipating a lot of things and trying to react to them. And this creates a very hot mess of potentials, because during the halving, every year what we've seen is a huge amount of Bitcoin being sold as miners try to sell the Bitcoin that they've accumulated at a decent price before all their revenues basically cut in half, because they now produce half the amount of Bitcoin that they did before this date. And a lot of Bitcoin flooding the market usually does spell bad news for the market, and we often see that altcoins do take over on their Bitcoin pairs after the halving. We'll take a look at Avalanche on its Bitcoin pair in a second, but oftentimes Bitcoin then reclaims that initial move, so we get like a sort of camel's hump after the halving on Bitcoin pairs. On US dollar pairs, it usually, after the halving, things usually do slowly trend up, but oftentimes there is a couple of big sell-offs either before or afterwards. I did a video on Bitcoin, go check it out, a couple of months back now, I think 2 months almost, but we basically saw, comparing all the halvings before, that usually there is some kind of a big sell-off either around the halving, whether it's before or after, whether there's sort of two medium sell-offs, one before, one afterwards. Pretty sure one year had two medium sell-offs after the halving. So a lot of people are celebrating because, they saw last halving when we had the COVID scare, which was in March before the halving, and Bitcoin had a big sell-off, and then we sort of climbed up from that point onwards, basically. And people are celebrating because they're going, well, it's very unlikely that we're going to have a drop now, and even if we do, we won't really put in any lows, most likely. So they're all celebrating because, the idea of a drop is unreasonable to them, and they're kind of not wrong. But if we another thing I like to point out in crypto is that these crazy moves up, they can happen in reverse, like here, and now that we've had a few months of green, it doesn't mean that we can't have just 1 or 2 really bad weeks of red that bring us down 50%, the same way that we rallied up 50% in 1 or 2 weeks. So again, not trying to be a downer, but just be aware of this. Again, just pointing out that historically, crypto, Bitcoin, and altcoins have often seen poor price action, immediate poor price action, like, extremes around the halving time. It's like the Christmas of crypto, if you get me, but not really. It's just a big significant date that the whole crypto space sort of reacts to. In terms of where I think Avalanche might go price-wise, I mean, long term, I would expect us to come back to this range at least. I would expect us to go above $100. And, again, this sort of move, the fact that Avalanche has been leading this charge with Solana and a couple of others, it bodes well to me for the bull run to come. It sort of shows that there is still a lot of activity around Avalanche, and it can very easily take off. So even though we're not in a bull run, and we're in a pre-halving year, which is historically a very boring year for crypto, Avalanche is still able to explode. So to me, it shows that there's still a lot of interest and a lot of users using Avalanche. So to have that during a bear market is very promising for what it might have during a bull market. So for me, definitely above $100. I wouldn't consider selling Avalanche below $100. And depending on your risk tolerance, you might want to hold for all-time highs, expecting new higher highs to come. I think it's something with these prices as well, you have to have a plan, but you also have to listen to the market. If you think that there's a lot of bullish sentiment around a crypto and your plan is to sell at $100, but Avalanche is climbing 20% each week, 20%, 20% during a bull run, maybe you'd be wise to sell at 100 and stick to your plan. I would personally lean more towards the sort of sell a bit at 100 and see where it goes, sell a bit more at 120, so on, so on, so on. But 2025, mid to 2025 or end of 2025, I would expect new all-time highs from this sort of impressive action. But again, I don't know for sure. I can't tell the future. In terms of 2024, I'd say maybe we probably enter 2024 around here. I can't see us moving too far up in the next few weeks. Maybe January, maybe we have another January rally like we did this current year as of recording, back in sort of January time, when Bitcoin mid-January sort of exploded. We could see something like that. I would doubt, but again, it's to do with these ETF approvals. They're sort of lining up for mid-January, so we could definitely see a big pump, but this could also be the sell the news event, because I think a lot of the current price action has come from the ETF hype. So I think a lot of that has already been factored into the market. So an ETF, if an ETF is approved, I think we'll probably see nothing too amazing. I think we'll probably see a bit of a sell the news like the Ethereum Shanghai upgrade, where Ethereum climbed steadily leading up to the Shanghai, and then it was just a big sell-off on the day. So yeah, that would be my prediction. I'd say closing this year at a similar price. By 2024, maybe we've gone up another 50% from 2024 to 2025. You know, we're sitting at somewhere like $60, and then maybe in the bull run, I don't know. I couldn't tell you, but I would expect good price action during that year. Where we close the year, I don't know. It's kind of too far away to assume anything with reason. Looking at Avalanche on its Bitcoin chart, we can see again this white resistance line that I've drawn, and funnily enough, we are at similar levels here, but where on our US dollar pair we're at these levels, on our Bitcoin pair we're even higher. So Avalanche, it shows that Avalanche has been doing much better on its Bitcoin pair compared to its US dollar pair. A couple of interesting things, you can see this wedge here, this descending wedge that I drew in the previous video over a month ago now, and me expecting it to break to the downside, it broke to the upside, and of course we had this huge rally up, and we're now back to sort of August 2022 levels on our Bitcoin pair. Again, I'm just going to switch this to the non-logarithmic so you get another understanding of what sort of we're looking at and how far away we are from our heights. Sort of 25,000 Satoshis is our all-time high, and we're currently at 12,000. So we've still got a ways to go, but again, it is very bullish for Avalanche, especially looking at altcoins on their Bitcoin pairs. It shows a lot more, in my opinion, than their US dollar pair. And what this is showing, well, it's also, I'll point out this sort of orange. I'll move back to the logarithmic so the lines line up better. Taking a look though at these orange lines, we can see that Avalanche put in its low. We see here it's put in a low, its cycle low. I'm taking this from sort of end of 2021, 2022 bear market year, bear market to bull run. So far, the low of this cycle, Avalanche puts it in on its Bitcoin pair, and then immediately afterwards has an extreme rally, like we saw on its US dollar pair. Avalanche pumps up until it reaches this resistance line, which it reached last time. And then once it reached this resistance line, it immediately retraced. And like we saw an extreme correction almost straight away, where it dropped basically 50%. And although it had another rally up, trying to reclaim what it had, it then dropped even more. And again, this was the start of the bull run that Bitcoin usually leads. Bitcoin usually leads the charge at the start of the bull runs, and we can see this on the Bitcoin pair. Like Avalanche is trying to keep up with Bitcoin, but Bitcoin just keeps reclaiming, keeps going down, keeps going down, keeps going down, until eventually we hit altcoin summer, basically, and altcoins just go crazy, and Avalanche puts in its all-time high, reaching 25,000 Satoshis, coming from a low of 1,000 Satoshis. And again, we've come from a low here of 3,000 Satoshis. So to assume a 25x, I think, would be unreasonable, considering that Avalanche is a much older coin, much higher market cap now. I think crazy moves like that would be a bit unrealistic. But I can definitely see us moving higher than this range on our Bitcoin pair. Like again, if we've taken this much ground in a bear market realistically, or the end of a bear market, not in a bull run, I'd be very excited to see what we can do in a bull run. But again, looking at that non-logarithmic chart, we are still a long way away from coming back to this level. Again, just pointing out, we did have a sort of descending wedge here, and you could argue that this could be a descending wedge if I sort of pull up the lines, excuse the color for a moment. We did have a sort of move like this. I'll just change them to blue so you can see very quickly. I can't remember which one, that one. So you could argue this was a descending wedge here, and of course more volatile time, more volatile price action. So we've come back to this level that the wedge began from. See, wedge started here, and we've gone slightly above it like we did here. Would it be unreasonable to assume that Avalanche loses value on its Bitcoin pair now? I don't know. I don't know. Again, that's kind of a decision you have to make. If you think Avalanche is going to play out like it did before, you'd be wise to move your Avalanche into Bitcoin. However, assuming that everything is going to play out the same is foolish. And we've seen that it hasn't always played out the same. Yesterday's video on Phantom showed us that the market can do extreme things year to year. So even though we have two things that could be considered similar, like, you know, a descending wedge followed by an extreme rally, and here descending wedge followed by an extreme rally. They're two different. The macro surrounding them, the coins themselves are different now. They've evolved. They're bigger market caps. They're under much more scrutiny than they were before. They don't, you know, they didn't have governments trying to shut them down during this phase. You know, they weren't on a huge amount of people's radar during this time. And even though they did, this is when they became on people's radar. Now they've had the effects applied to them. It's just a very different time, So you have to assume that things will not play out the same. Although I am bullish for crypto, I think we will have a very good crypto summer. And again, this strong movement is a good indicator. I think that about wraps it up for this video, guys. I've spoken about everything I want to, but if you think I missed anything, let me know down in the comments. And if you have any questions, let me know as well. I always love chatting to you guys, so please comment down below. Hope you guys had a Merry Christmas and that you're looking forward to the new year. Take care and peace.